Hey guys, what's up? This is False Fools 123 coming at you from Medford, Oregon. So, you may have noticed if you've been paying attention to my, feed, but I've been trying to, upload things all around the same time of the month for, very similar video types. I've been trying to, have a few more live streams in my channel, mostly just as a way to reduce editing time and just as a way of providing new content, mostly because with the editing that I have right now that I'm using, I can't quite bring it to a high enough quality that I'm satisfied with, and that's just a limitation of the technology. So until I can really improve my tech, until I can improve this, my editing software, I'm just trying to find other ways that I can learn and grow, and also just don't spend as much time pulling my hair out in the editing booth. So this video is going to be me reading some of my short stories, and I love I like writing. It is something that I have a few videos on. I'll put a link to my playlist down below. And one of the things I have not written too much of, but I've always enjoyed the works I finish, have been my short stories. I'm definitely the kind of guy that, I'll get a new notebook and I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna, totally write a, novel. First day of NaNoWriMo, I'm pumped. I do it for, maybe 3 days, and then I'm dead inside. But, with short stories, I'll usually finish those eventually, and honestly, I don't put enough effort into my short stories. I really don't. Because this is always a, large editing process with a huge amount of polish, and I'm usually the type of person that, once I finish something, I don't want to go back and do it. Not because I don't want it to be better, but just because I guess I'm a lazy person. But I enjoy the stories that I have, just because it's hard to finish something no matter what it is, if it's a drawing or a song or a story. And so if you're able to complete something, that's a really great satisfaction. I still think, editing is important, revision is important, and if you want to be a professional, you definitely have to do these things. But if you're just having fun, if you're just making shit on the fly, it's not going to be the end of the world, right? So now hopefully I can figure out how to do this in editing. But my first video, you know what I mean, my first story was one that I actually made in high school. And I'm going to try to tell these in order. I'm going to try to read these to you in a chronological order as best as I can. And in the story, I remember I had written it partially during the summer before. I believe that was either my junior, I think it was my junior year of high school. It was for an English class assignment. And our library had gotten I'm trying to get my thoughts. And so the library had gotten a grant for podcasting equipment because it was some sort of enrichment program. And so they teamed up with the English classes to discuss podcasts and how to make one. And at the time, I was not into podcasts in the slightest. I had listened to Welcome to Night Vale, which was the first podcast I had ever listened to. And besides that, I had never really listened to them. It wasn't until I was nearly out of high school that I actually started getting into them. I started working on on the podcast database wiki in 2017. So that was, still a year after I graduated. So that moment of time, podcasts were they had been around. They've been around since 2004. But I was not really into them. They were not something that was part of my day-to-day life. And so what we were supposed to do is that for our project, we had to write a short story and we had to narrate it for the trying to get my thoughts together for the project. And so it would be about a 5-minute long story and it would just be over and done with. And I thought it was a really fun project to work on. I thought it was really interesting. And I did my best with the story. I don't think it's the best, but oh, I remember one more thing about the requirements. we were reading the book Things They Carried or Things I Carried, or I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I'm going to use some editing magic to tell you about it. Basically, it was a I guess autobiography or memoir set during the Vietnamese War, because we were learning about that in history class, like crossover. And it was just like kind of like talking about the horrors of war and like all of these other things. And so our short stories is supposed to be about like sort of like carrying, I guess, emotional or physical like burdens. And so I think I matched it pretty well. There's this scene in the short story that you'll be listening to where the main character carries a Bannister Knob up a staircase, and it's supposed to be like sort of this like sort of emotional allegory. And so I don't know how well it did. I remember the original short story that I wrote was a lot longer. But looking back at it now, like I definitely feel that my descriptions of grief in the story were very underdeveloped. I do try to have it. So I do have another story where grief is a subject because apparently I'm an emo bitch. So in my novel, that's actually one of the sort of plot points was that the main character Margaret was trying to get over, sort of like the loss of her sister, and so I try to incorporate mostly a lot of the feelings I dealt with when my grandma passed, like a lot of the grief I felt. I try to channel that sort of emotional experience for Margaret. But with this story, I didn't have that, I guess, experience. So I definitely feel that, the difference is there's a bit more of a difference between the two stories. Anyway, I'm gonna pop off, let you listen to that, and that's going to be our first story for the evening.
The gray skies and muddied the flower beds and created puddles against the flagstones outside. She stared at the drops, her hot face flushed against the cold glass, her lungs breathing in the cold air as raindrops plinked and dropped underneath the eaves in front of her. She heard the door open. "Honey, why are the lights off?" her mother said, turning on the light in the front hall. "Never mind that. Come help me with the groceries." She left to go help her mother. 7:20 p.m. She sat in her bed listening to music, some female singer that she had forgotten the name of. Not that she cared anymore. Her school reader sat on her lap unopened. She wondered why she had even gotten it out. She heard her mother's footsteps coming down the hallway, her mother's head appearing in the doorway. "Honey, it's time for bed. I'm turning off your light." A second later, the room was dark. She felt uncomfortable, uneasy, afraid. She quietly opened the top drawer of the dresser, the one she had since she was 6, pulling out her diary. She placed the pencil to the page and dutifully wrote the date. She waited, begging, pleading with herself to feel anything at all. Even the feelings she had tried so hard to bury at the funeral, wishing then to throw dirt over them as she had thrown dirt over his grave. Nothing. In a fit of anger, she closed the book. It was 8:30. She stood in a park, the sun shined overhead, striking long shadows on the trees and making smaller ones on the blades of grass that smothered the hills around her. Mr. Wallertick sat on a park bench in front of her. He was too painful to look at. At first he said nothing, and then took her hand and walked away with her. It was a group of trees. She turned around to speak to him, but he was already gone. In her hand was some kind of object. It was wooden, round. A ball? No, it had a hole in it. She couldn't figure out what it was, until she did. She threw it away from her, casting it away with her very being. She didn't want to think about it, didn't want to ever have to think about it. But it was too late. The door creaked. "Hello, Mr. Wallertick? Anyone home?" she called. "I'm up here," the voice in the foyer replied. There you are. I'll be right down. She looked at him, just stepping down the stairs cracking under him. He stumbled, clutching at the banister knob, which broke off in his hands. He fell tumbling over and over before falling finally to the floor. So slowly in her mind, while it happened so quickly, she couldn't even shout his name. The knob bounced once, twice on the stairs, then rolled off past them underneath her chest. Her best friend of 92 years passed away, and she could have done nothing but hold his lifeless hand. She rang the bell. Mr. Waltic opened the door. She seemed much more tired since the funeral. "Hello, dear," she replied. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know. I just had to come here." "I understand, dear. I'll go make us some tea." Mrs. Waltic turned and left walking toward the kitchen. She walked past the small hall into the foyer. She paused. It was spotless. For some reason, that felt wrong. Somehow it felt when people died, their spots of where they lay should have been marked forever, as if a giant cloud of blood and sadness hovered over it, so as not to be forgotten. She collected herself. She reached down, grasping and reaching underneath the chest of drawers. She grabbed it, the banister knob. She started up the staircase, holding its wooden surface in her hand. It may have caused her so much pain in her life, but it, like herself, was in it, and like herself, deserved forgiveness. She stood at the top of the staircase and screwed the knob back into place. The weight she had felt in her since that day lifted slightly. She wasn't over her grief, but it was a start, and it was the start of a new beginning. She walked out, saying goodbye to the Walletics.
Now, I think, I remember correctly, I just mentioned my novel earlier, and I don't think I have a name for it yet. I think Working Title, I think I call it Ghost Town or Ghost House or something like that. And short synopsis is this woman, Margaret Elizabeth Carter, moves into a new house, and she's going to open up to it, be a bed and breakfast. But what she doesn't know is that it's super fucking haunted. And so, really basic, plot idea. You've seen that in everything. That's Haunting of Hill House. That's The Conjuring. That's every, horror movie from, the mid-2000s. Haunted houses. That's some basic bullshit. But I honestly really love, and I haven't written enough about it, really. I only ever wrote about, I think, 3 chapters. But someday I do, really want to open it up again, sort of, get back into the storytelling, just because I loved the story. It was one of my, I guess, more fleshed out characters. And so I had really rough outlines, very rough outline, on a post-it note type outline, the story, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters. I love just, the style and the way of writing it. I actually might just read you a short clip from the actual novel itself. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because the next short story is based in universe from the novel. And give me a second, because here we go. So this is an excerpt from chapter 2 of my actual novel, and this is just to sort of give you a style of the writing style that I use for it. Pulling up onto Main Street, Fort Sospa, she was met with the quaintness of the sleepy town. Poplars and maples dotted the meridians disguised as greens that separated the uncongested traffic. It was amazing how still and quiet everything was. Just the quiet murmur of birds and cafe patrons. A light taciturn smile enveloped the town. Julia was right. There were some great examples of Dutch colonial. Julia had a real eye for that sort of thing, making her a favorite of her boss. Herself, on the other hand, could only catch the most basic hints of design. calling Rococo out only by the Fedicalant. So I used, one of the things I mentioned a lot was a lot of architectural terms, a lot of art terms. And I think that's mostly just because those sort of things fascinate me. And I like to include a lot of the sort of references as a sort of descriptive style. You might notice with my Boolean blog pages, I'll draw on a lot of different references from games or movies, and that's really just because I like to use illusion as a way of providing more detail and context. Now, the short story that I wrote for this universe is actually supposed to be based on what I would consider to be the second novel. Because the first novel deals with, let's see, Civil War, antebellum period, right, and modern day. And so the second novel goes between, it's said, actually quite soon after the events of the first novel. And once again, basic outlines. But the point being is that, so it said in the 1940s as sort of the flashback period. So where the first ghost was living during the Civil War, the 1850s, this ghost died during the 1940s before World War One. And so in the story there was, I believe during the time period that I was writing it, was that there was a massive heat wave during that year. I don't know if it actually happened in real life, but in the story there was. And so this is written as a newspaper article, a form of, I'm trying to remember what it's called, epistological fiction, which basically just means that it's a narrative piece taken from something perceived to be reward. So imagine, you're playing a game or something, and you find a newspaper article or a diary or a journal, like, a lot of that like sort of Lovecraftian found document type stuff, or Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Not that I'm comparing my work to theirs. I'm simply using, a very common, famous example of this style. Point being, this short story is taken in the form of a newspaper article printed in the local newspaper. So with that context in mind, I shall actually get on with the actual, short story. Fort Sassafras, Tribune, August 5th, 1941. Local manor's caretaker found body missing for 7 days. Andrew Thomas, caretaker to the colonial-style estate, was found dead Monday, being previously missing the Monday of last week. On the night in question, July 29th, the county was hit by one of the longest thunderstorms of the past decade. At the time, both Andrew Thomas and his wife fought to control the manor's horses, which were frightened by the storm, according to the testimony of Mrs. Thomas. Once the horses were calmed and stalled, caretaker Thomas grabbed a lantern to capture 3 horses that had bolted in the confusion. The testimony of Mrs. Thomas continues as follows. When he left me, he was dressed like myself in our night clothes, but had put on a raincoat and his rubber boots. He grabbed one of the lanterns and went in the direction of some of the hoof prints. I screamed, terribly affrighted due to the storm, after him to be careful, but he just waved me off. I went inside and made some tea, planning on waiting up for him. I was anxious for my husband because of the storm and did not go to bed, though, however, I must have fallen asleep as I awoke just before dawn. I called to my husband, assuming he came in later in the night and chose not to wake me. I climbed the stairs to wake him and asked if he had any luck with the horses, but when I got to the bedroom, I noticed that not only was the bed empty, but also unslept in. In a panic, I searched the rest of the house, fearing the worst, but could not find him anywhere. When it was light, I took one of the horses left and rode to the police station. Caretaker Thomas's body was found early Monday morning by a local hunter. When I first saw the body, I didn't realize what it was. I came closer, touching the form, and I realized it was a human. It nearly jumped out of my skin. At that time, I didn't know he was dead, so I turned him over, fearing that he might have collapsed because of fatigue, and had wandered for some barn dance and had passed out in a puddle of his own vomit. Turning the corpse to face me, I backed away because of how rotted it was. I stumbled backwards, a couple feet, and vomited. I then ran as fast as I could to the police. Caretaker Thomas was found in his night clothes, wearing a gray raincoat and galoshes. A kerosene lantern was found a few feet from his body, the lamp shattered. Due to the nature of the body, the local medical examiner cannot determine the cause of death, whether the death is suspicious or being the cause of foul play. The ME has requested an autopsy before the signing of the death certificate and releasing the body. The police have not answered any question concerning the death of Caretaker Thomas, but have released the following statement. If you have any information about Andrew Thomas on the night of July 29th or the whereabouts of the missing horses, please contact the police station at your earliest convenience. Andrew Thomas's funeral will be held approximately 1 month from now, the exact date undetermined, depending on the release of the body from the coroner's office. It will be a closed casket funeral. So I really liked the tone of the piece just because I had never really written such a serious, or I guess like in the tone serious, where it was very matter of fact, very articulated. And that's mostly just because I'm not a journalist, and so it was something new to emulate that style. Now, my last story for the evening, and if I'm being honest, I'm trying to stretch out my legs right now because I've fallen asleep, is one that I wrote, look at me with that good English, that I wrote sometime after college. I don't remember when exactly. I just remember that it was, sometime after college when I had... It would have been after I had my classes, but sometime during my internship, I believe. For those who... I actually don't know if I ever mentioned on this channel. Basically, with my college, I was having 1 year of actual classes where we had lab work, and we were in class, we were on a chef's wipes. And then we had 1 year, which was essentially a work study. And that basically just meant that we worked somewhere and got that experience. So around that time, I had, I'd become friends with some old classmates, one of which eventually became my roommate. And basically, at the time, both of them were... I'm trying to remember. I know one of them was Wiccan. I'm not sure about the other one, but they basically were interested in the craft. One of them had, been following her path for quite some time. And so it was something that I was much more exposed to. And I thought it was really interesting. In my novel, I do have a character who is... I'm not going to say... She's not Wiccan, but she is some form of neo-pagan. And so, being more exposed to sort of, I guess their religion, their practice, whatever you want to call it, I kind of wanted to write a story involving those sort of themes, have a character that came from that background. And now please do not hate in the comments. This story that I wrote was not meant to be appropriative or to stereotype anybody's religious or spiritual practices. This was simply, I guess, my own interpretation or collation of the culture I saw. So I did try to be as faithful and as respectful as possible with this depiction, but I can definitely assume that I might have either, some minor errors or some, misrepresentations. So if you don't agree with this depiction, obviously, please tell me in the comments, but please do just be respectful. I mean, no ill will, no disrespect with this depiction. It's simply just me writing a character from a background that I was not used to. Now with that little diatribe, that little disclaimer out of the way, I'm going to read you my final short story of the evening. And this one is titled Elsie. Okay. She stared out at the rain falling on the garden beneath. It was green and wet. The idea forms of big, round, waxy leaves and wet, nearly flowerless blossoms that were naked like a used corn cob. She stirred her tea and sipped up the oolong and herbs she had used to make it. She felt power surge through her as she connected with the earth. Or perhaps it was because of the caffeine. The world is a combination of intensities and influences, but sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. A witch should use her head as much as her heart. She stared out into the garden, which shined, imbued the world with its energy of the happiness, the plants growing, the energy they gave off in this concentration of health and beauty. The plants were no less happy. They liked the rain. It cooled them down and parched their throats. It was a refreshment, a rejuvenation. The boon in a large endless cycle of quench and parch. The difference between her and her plants was that it seemed that she was the one that had started in the cycle on her own volition. With free will comes responsibility, she mused. She turned back to the rest of the kitchen. To the uninitiated it would seem innocuous, but she bare the tools of her practice quite clearly. The cup pots, the bundles of herbs drying on the walls, the crystals in focus placed delightfully in the mantel, the tumbled rocks and agates presented so casually and kitschy about. It's not that she flung them around so carelessly, simply that she had them where she needed them. She kept her altar in the pantry closet, not because of any need for secrecy. It was a matter of preference. She had some time ago heard of the idea of a prayer closet, a closed-off, secluded space where one could commune and genuflect. She liked the idea. A place of worship away from distractions. She was not the type of person who cast spells and blessings sitting watching reruns of the Andy Griffin Show, but she also didn't want a spell broken by the mailman or the neighbor's nosy dog chasing the hens out in the yard. It was also nice for when she had guests. Her grandchildren knew that sometimes Grandma spent time in her closet, and that they shouldn't interrupt her. Her children wanted to be raised religiously so that they could make their own decisions when they were of proper reasoning. She wasn't one to proselytize her family, but it would be nice to show them how to read the cards, or to teach them the importance of nature and the consequences of their actions. A bit of folk magic is always useful, whether it's a simple blessing or a ward against negative energy. She heard a knock on her door. It was a young woman, mid-20s, dressed in a business formal blouse, pencil skirt, and flats. Though, judging from the style she worked in, a fairly small office. They were a bit department store. But considering that she was wearing a peasant blouse she bought at the local thrift store, she wasn't one to judge one's material decisions. "Come in," she said casually. Sorry, you're Elsie, right? I wasn't expecting so-and-so. Plain? Not everyone that you will meet is going to look like a boardwalk gypsy, you know. We'll help you feel better. I can wear a tea towel as a turban and talk about a stranger vague, dark, and handsome, she said dramatically with a smirk. I didn't mean to any offense. Don't worry, sweetie, she said, putting up her hand. Everyone has their expectations. We all think that every Christian is a Bible thumper, every Buddhist is sitting in a monastery in Tibet, and every witch is a flamboyant, enigmatic foreigner named Madame Zonia. She said mischievously. Either that or I'm going to get you, my pretties, she said in her best Wicked Witch of the West voice, which was absolutely terrible. Anyway, please come, sit down, she gestured her in. Would you like some tea before we start? What's in it? The woman said timidly. Oolong, rosemary, thyme, a little bit of lemon. You know, nothing too witchy, she joked. Sure, she said. That sounds nice. She had sat down by then. She had slipped one foot out of her penny loafers and traced a circle in the rug with her host's foot nervously. She seemed closed off. You can relax, sweetie. This is a reading, not a blood sacrifice. Sorry, she muttered embarrassedly. She didn't mean to upset her more. Perhaps the cards will help ease your mind. Would you like to start? She asked. Sure. What do I need to do? Just sit there and think about a question you want to ask about a situation or person that you want to know about. As she said this, the woman touched her lips, dragging the back of her knuckle across her mouth, and then brushing it back a string of hair behind her ears. Sort of boyish, she thought. Or a girl. She shouldn't assume. You want to know if they feel the same way? The woman looked unsettled. How did you know? Well, a little bit of cold reading. The cards are the ones speaking, but they're a bit easier to interpret if I have a bit of context. Do you need details? Because she nervously grabbed her arm. No. Keep the details for yourself. If you tell me too much, it might influence my reading, if only subconsciously. Putting on a bit of an air. This is a very simple divination. 4 cards. The woman leaned in, breathing sharply, curiously. She shuffled the deck, ending with a perfect card dealer's bridge. She was no Madame Zonia, but she had her own sense of flair. She closed her eyes, and she placed down the cards one by one. The past, the present, the future, and the inevitable outcome. She turned over the first card. Death, inverted. What does that mean? Am I allowed to talk? Well, of course, dear. This is a divination, not a funeral. Inverted means the opposite of the usual meaning. This can be good or bad depending on the context. Strength inverted is weakness and doubt. The tower inverted is calamity averted. In this case, death represents a large change or the end of a cycle. Cycle? A lot of things are cyclical in life. Relationships, business opportunities, personal life projects. You start, progress, and eventually end, learning something in the progress, soon to try again the next day. Like the hero's journey, you find something and complete it, growing as a person. In this case, the card means that you're resistant to change, perhaps in your past. You wanted to change the situation, but couldn't, or you didn't know if you were ready for a change. But this is in the past. The future, the chariot. The chariot symbolizes progression and perseverance. It might mean that your situation will escalate in the future towards the inevitable outcome, or it might mean that you need to be steadfast and keep working on the relationship. Either way, it leads to the final outcome. She flipped over the final card, the Lovers. The one inhaled. Now the Lovers can represent lots of things. Balance, harmony, healthy relationships of all kinds. However, given the context, I think that you can take this one literally. If you continue on this path, you will get the outcome that you want. Now, always remember, honey, the cards can explain the situation, but they cannot dictate your actions. They provide the advice, but future is not set in stone. No matter what the cards tell you, you and you alone are responsible for your actions. Thank you, Elsie, the woman said, a bit thrilled. How much do I owe you? If you could leave a couple dollars in the bowl by the door, that would be wonderful. The woman got up from her chair. She seemed mooched, more relaxed, though she couldn't tell if that was from the good news or simply getting acclimated to the new situation. Smiling, she walked towards the kitchen door, stopping by the pedestal where she kept the fishbowl. She left what looked to be a 20. Bless her soul. The tea kettle whistled. She got up, poured herself another cup, and sat in front of the window again. She could see the woman closing the garden gate and waved. It was going to be a while till the next customer. She should probably do something else for a while. The rain was letting up, so she might put on her Welshes and tend the garden for a bit. She took a sip of her tea. And so, that's the end of Elsie. And I like the story. Looking back, I definitely noticed that it definitely is improved reading. I actually had to restart the video just because the first time I tried reading it, I messed it up. But I think it had some... There were a few parts of the story that I did enjoy, a few details that I felt proud for having. And I definitely like the tone that the character took. Mostly just because sometimes I feel if my stories all have the same tone for all of my different characters. And so I'm glad that, with different short stories, with different plots, I'll have, a difference in tone. I'll have a story which changes, that actually has depth, or range, or variety, or whatever you want to phrase it. And so I'm satisfied with the story. I'm sure there could be a million ways that it could be better. But I was just really trying to get into a character, really try to write from a perspective that I wasn't really 100% familiar with. And so some of, the things I wrote about, I definitely took from my own experience, but other things, I had to sort of I guess, approximate from things I had learned or had, like, met before. And so I definitely enjoyed that short story. I ain't gonna say any of these were my best or, like, the most wonderful things that I've ever written, but it was something that was really enjoyable to share. So thank you very much for listening. Hey guys, so I hope you enjoyed my video. I had a lot of fun, telling you some of my short stories. And this is not all of my writings. This is not everything that I've ever written. But those were a few of my, I guess, newer pieces that I've wrote. I'm not the most prolific writer, but it is something that I just have not really shared that much with people. And so it's something personal, it's something unique, and in the fun, fast-paced world of the YouTube era, that means that booyah booyah content, y'all. I don't know what that was. But, I think my next writing video that I'm going to do, which will probably be sometime next month, is going to be diving into my novel that I actually wrote, or I say wrote, but it's not even a novel, that I started, there you go, in 2016 when I was in high school. So, definitely excited to unpack that. It's not something I've shared with a lot of people. I don't even think that most of my friends knew that it's something I had. But, you guys are going to know about it because you get all the cool shit. There you go. Benefits of subscribing to me. Next week, we're going to be having another ukulele cover. And I don't know how I felt about my, last one. It was something I worked really hard on, and I just tried to do my best. But this one, I definitely had a bit more practice with the song. It was actually one of the first ones I started learning how to play when I started the ukulele. I'm not going to tell you what it is, because that way you have to come back in next week. See? That's the smart marketing decisions. Anyway, guys, just want to remind you, like it, like the video if you enjoyed the content. Comment down below if you want to tell me things, especially how much you hated everything I did. And just share it, because I want to, throw my face out there. Why the heck not? If you got a friend who wants to sit down and listen to some random guy from Medford, Oregon read you some short stories, you know who they are. They need to see my face. And if you don't like, my YouTube videos, if you don't really care for this type of content, I do make other stuff. See, I'm good to you like that. You can check out the Boolean blog, which does a lot of different reviews. Once a week, different topics, really fun stuff. I mostly cover horror. Then I got RJ's Diner, which is going to be recipes. And right now it's all pies, because I am a pie slut, okay? But eventually we're going to be doing more things with that. And that's really all the content I have all the places I'm posting right now. I also have a Bandcamp. I'm not uploading there, but if you like having random people sing sad emo songs in the ukulele, then you know where to go. I'm going to post links all the way down below, all of them, every single one. You're going to find them, including a link to my Writers Cafe for that last short story that I narrated to you, so that you can see all of my horrible spelling mistakes. Anyway, guys, I just want to let you know that I was happy to have you here. I'm glad that you're listening. And this is going to be False Bulls 123 signing out.